Have you ever sat in a meeting, quiet, watching someone speak with absolute confidence, and thought to yourself, they have no idea what they're talking about, not a little wrong, entirely wrong, but their voice doesn't shake, their words don't hesitate, and somehow people listen. Have you ever watched someone rise through the ranks, promoted, praised, put on pedestals, even though deep down you know they lack the depth, the thoughtfulness, the real substance? Have you ever noticed how the ones who question themselves the most, the ones who think carefully, speak gently, doubt their own certainty, are the very ones who get overlooked? If that's ever felt true to you, not just once, but again and again, you're not imagining it. I've seen it too, and I've wondered quietly for a long time, is this just bad luck? Or is something deeper going on? It turns out there's a logic to this madness, a twisted but predictable psychology. Modern research confirms it. And strangely enough, so did a man who lived over 500 years ago. Niccolo Machiavelli. He didn't just write about power. He dissected it. He exposed the shadowy mechanics behind who rises, who falls, and why people are so often seduced by appearance over essence. But this isn't just about old politics or history. It's about right now. It's about your job, your team, your world. Because once you understand how the mind works, especially under stress, under fear, under uncertainty, it becomes clear why confidence outshines competence, why loudness gets mistaken for leadership, and why intelligence, real deep, morally grounded intelligence, often gets left in the dark. This isn't some bitter rant. It's a quiet diagnosis of a deeper condition. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, am I the only one who sees this? You're not alone. You were just early. You were just paying attention. In this video, we'll explore why foolish people often end up in power, not by accident, but by design. We'll look at what modern psychology says about confidence, overestimation, and the mental shortcuts we all fall for. And we'll explore what Machiavelli knew and what you can do to see through the illusion. And maybe, just maybe, protect yourself from being manipulated by it. If you've ever felt like being thoughtful makes you invisible, if you've ever wondered why the world rewards simplicity more than sincerity, then this story is for you. You're listening to Silent Sage Stories, where wisdom whispers and reflection finds a home. If this resonates with you, if it sparks even a small quiet yes in the back of your mind, consider liking this video. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next reflection. And maybe share it with someone who's been feeling the same quiet frustration you have. Sometimes, one gentle insight is enough to remind someone, you're not crazy. you're just awake. Coming up next, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and why the least capable often feel the most certain. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room rarely knows what they're talking about? They interrupt. They declare. They smile as if they've solved something no one else could possibly understand. And meanwhile, somewhere at the edge of the room, the person who actually does understand stays quiet, second guesses their own thought, waits for the right moment that never comes. This isn't coincidence. There's a reason the world feels tilted in favor of the overconfident, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. In the late 1990s, two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a series of studies to investigate a curious pattern. People who perform the worst at a task consistently rate their own performance the highest. In other words, the less someone knows, the more likely they are to think they know everything. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But then you think back to every boss who never asked a question, every leader who answered before listening, every online guru who promised certainty in 5 easy steps. And it makes a strange kind of sense. There's something about not knowing what you don't know that frees people to be completely, irrationally confident. No self-doubt, no humility, just the illusion of clarity. Meanwhile, the people who do understand the thoughtful, the curious, the quietly capable, they see the complexity. They see the exceptions. They see the edge cases, the trade-offs, the subtle variables that make the truth less convenient. And so they hesitate. They say, "It depends." They say, "I'm not sure." They say, "Let's think this through." And the world often walks right past them. Because in a world addicted to certainty, humility sounds like weakness. The human brain isn't built for nuance, especially not when it's tired, afraid, or overloaded. So we reach for shortcuts. Certainty feels safe. Confidence looks like competence. We're drawn to people who say, "I know what to do," even if, deep down, something about them feels off. This isn't just a personal quirk. It's a cognitive bias, a psychological reflex hardwired into our species. It helped us survive in simpler times when a bold leader meant action and hesitation could mean death. But today, that same reflex gets hijacked by influencers, executives, politicians, people who've mastered the art of appearing right, whether or not they actually are. Here's what's truly cruel about this dynamic. The more thoughtful you are, the more likely you are to doubt yourself. That's not because you're weak. It's because you care about accuracy, about truth, about the damage that can be done when you're wrong. You've probably stayed up late, wondering if you misread a situation. Replayed conversations in your mind, line by line. Thought, maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm the problem. And while you're wrestling with all that, someone else with half your insight and none of your caution is already making a decision, claiming the spotlight, taking credit. It's not fair, but it's real, and the world keeps rewarding the people who sound sure over the people who actually think. So what do you do if you're someone who sees the gray in every black and white answer? You learn to see the game, not to become like them, but to stop blaming yourself for not being them. This effect, this confidence illusion, isn't about you being broken. It's about a world that mistakes volume for vision. And once you know that you can stop shrinking just because someone else is louder, you can start asking better questions. You can start protecting your attention from shallow certainty. You can start recognizing that not knowing everything is actually a sign you're paying attention. The truth is, the people we should trust the most are often the ones who don't speak in absolutes. They say things like, "Here's what we know so far," or "Let's test that assumption," or "I might be wrong, but here's how I see it." That kind of thinking is rare. It's quiet. It takes effort to notice. But it's also the only kind that has a chance of being right when it really matters. So the next time you feel yourself pulling back, staying silent, because someone else is louder or more confident, pause. Remember, confidence is not truth. Certainty is not wisdom. And knowing less doesn't make them stronger. It just makes them louder. You don't have to outshout them. You just have to keep seeing clearly. Because eventually, the noise dies down. And when it does, people remember who really knew what they were talking about. Coming up next, we'll explore why incompetent leaders surround themselves with even more incompetent people, and how entire systems end up reinforcing the illusion of expertise. Let's continue. You've probably seen it happen. A mediocre leader gets promoted, then hires a team that's somehow even worse. Not just inexperienced, but incapable. Not just quiet, but loyal, uncritical, eager to please. And slowly, the entire room starts to change. Meetings become hollow. Ideas shrink. No one questions anything anymore. What you're watching isn't just bad luck. It's a psychological mechanism, and it has a name. It's called competence threat. Here's how it works when someone insecure rises to power. Not by skill, but by charm or circumstance. They often feel afraid. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that someone smarter, sharper, more capable might outshine them. So what do? They stop hiring based on talent and start hiring based on safety. They choose people who won't challenge them, people who nod instead of push back, people who confuse loyalty with silence. At first, it just looks like bad management, but over time, it becomes structural. An entire team, department, even company, slowly fills with people chosen not for their insight, but for their obedience. This isn't hypothetical. It's been documented across governments, corporations, even families. It's why some organizations feel like emotional deserts. It's why speaking up can feel dangerous, even when you're right. The deeper issue is this: incompetent leaders don't just survive in these environments, they thrive. Because the more unqualified voices surround them, the more they appear competent by comparison. It's relative. It's an illusion of being the smartest in the room, but only because the room has been hand-picked to never outshine them. And this is where it gets darker, because this illusion feeds itself. A leader afraid of looking small hires people even smaller. Those people, in turn, replicate the same pattern, hiring others who pose no threat. And soon, mediocrity isn't just accepted, it's protected. You can feel it in the culture. People stop offering new ideas. Meetings become performances. No one asks questions that matter. And if you do, you're labeled difficult, not a team player. Too intense, too honest, too much. What's really happening is simple. You've broken the spell. You've reminded them, consciously or not, that competence still exists. And that's terrifying to people whose power depends on pretending it doesn't. This is how incompetence becomes systemic. It's not that bad leaders don't notice talent. They do. They just see it as a threat instead of an asset. They don't ask, how can this person help us grow? They ask, could this person replace me? That shift from collaboration to protection is where decay begins. And if you're someone who does care, who can see what's wrong, you'll feel it. You'll feel the tension in the air when you ask a hard question. The forced smiles, the awkward silences. You'll start wondering, am I overreacting? You're not. You're just waking up to the rules of a game you didn't know you were playing. And the unspoken rule is this: don't make anyone look bad, even by accident. It's not your tone. It's not your attitude. It's your competence. That's what threatens them. But here's the twist. While they fear you, they also need you. Because systems built on illusion still require some scaffolding of truth. And so, if you're useful enough, quiet enough, they'll keep you close. But never too close. Not enough to lead, not enough to shine, just enough to make them look better by contrast. It's a strange kind of prison, one where your value is visible, but never honored, where your insight is needed, but never welcomed. And if you stay long enough, you'll start questioning your own worth. You'll start lowering your standards, shrinking your ideas, playing small just to stay safe. That's how the system wins. Not by convincing you it's right, but by exhausting your will to resist. So what do? First, you name it. You stop gaslighting yourself. You stop thinking you're the problem. You realize that what you're experiencing is real, and it has been studied, mapped, understood. Then you decide. You decide whether this is a place worth staying in, whether there's room for growth, whether there's anyone willing to protect competence, not just power. And if there's not, you leave, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Because no matter how smart, kind, or capable you are, you cannot thrive in a system designed to fear people like you. And if you do decide to stay for now, you stay with your eyes open. You stop expecting recognition. You stop waiting for fairness. And you begin to protect your own mind from the slow erosion of self-worth that these systems can cause. You find other thinkers, other quiet souls, other people who see like you do. And you remember, it's not arrogance to know your own value. It's survival. Because in a world that rewards comfort over truth, being competent is an act of quiet rebellion. Coming up next, why appearances fool us so easily, and how the brain mistakes confidence for clarity, even when the facts say otherwise. Let's keep going. There's a strange thing our minds do. We don't always trust the smartest person in the room, but we almost always trust the most certain. It's not that we mean to, it just happens. Someone speaks with confidence, a straight spine, a steady voice, no hesitation, and we lean in. We assume they know. We assume they've thought it through. We assume because they sound sure, they must be right. But what if that's the very illusion keeping us stuck? Cognitive scientists call it signal misattribution. We mistake the signal of confidence, volume, speed, decisiveness for the substance of competence. Our brains, always trying to conserve energy, use shortcuts to decide who to trust. And confidence is an easy shortcut. It's fast. It's visible. It doesn't ask us to think too hard, especially when we're overwhelmed. In environments full of uncertainty, economic stress, social tension, personal fatigue, our cognitive load spikes. We get tired of thinking. We want answers. We crave simplicity. And into that craving walks someone who says, here's what's true. Here's what's wrong. Here's what to do. They say it clearly, firmly. without apology, and just like that, we follow. Not because it's right, but because it feels relieving. This is how false leaders rise. Not through mastery, but through mastery of presentation. And here's where it gets harder. They believe it too. The illusion is so complete that overconfident people don't just fool others, they fool themselves. They talk themselves into thinking they're the solution. They don't wrestle with doubt. They don't ask hard questions. They don't slow down to check the map. They just drive faster. Meanwhile, the person who does pause, who does check the map, who does ask, "Are we going the right way?" gets left behind, or worse, gets labeled indecisive, not leadership material. Two in their head. It's a cruel paradox, because in truth, the people we should trust most are often the ones who aren't completely sure. They hedge, they weigh options. They say maybe. They sound less like a savior and more like a scientist. But that's not what our instincts are drawn to. We evolved to seek certainty, not accuracy, because once upon a time in the wild, hesitation could get you killed. And boldness, even reckless boldness, could get you fed. So we inherited a nervous system that favors speed over depth, action over contemplation, sound over silence. And in the modern world, that instinct gets hijacked by marketers, by politicians, by influencers who say, "Don't overthink it. Just do this." We reward them. We repost them. We follow them by the millions. And slowly, we forget what wisdom sounds like. It doesn't sound like a catchphrase, or a hot take, or a viral thread. It sounds like, "Let me sit with that." It sounds like I'm still learning. It sounds like someone who's more interested in being useful than being right. But when was the last time we made that person a leader? Here's the deeper truth in complex systems. Organizations, governments, cultures, the most important decisions usually involve trade-offs. No easy wins. No perfect answers. Just long-term consequences that require patience and honesty. And the people most qualified to handle those decisions, often the quietest, because they know how much they don't know. They don't speak in absolutes. They ask for more data. But here's the risk. The crowd rarely rewards complexity, especially when someone else is offering certainty. And so, time after time, the simple answer wins, not because it's right, but because it's easier to swallow. We mistake clarity of tone for clarity of truth. And the real thinkers, the ones who hold nuance with care, are left whispering in the noise. So what can we do? We can learn to recognize the spell. We can notice when our brains lean toward certainty and gently question it. We can ask, is this person explaining or performing? Do they make space for doubt or shut it down? Are they loud because they know, or because they need to be heard? And most importantly, we can start listening for the quiet voices again, because sometimes the person who pauses before speaking, who doesn't have a ready answer, who says, "Let me think about that," might just be the only one telling the truth. Coming up, why people with high intelligence and strong ethics often sabotage their own rise to power, and how morality, more than anything else, becomes a liability in corrupt systems. We're just getting to the heart of it. If you've ever felt held back by your own conscience, you're not alone. There's a kind of quiet war that plays out inside people who think deeply, especially those who care about right and wrong. It doesn't show up like rage. It doesn't explode. It unfolds silently, a slow, persistent drag on your ability to move forward. And it sounds like this. I shouldn't say that. It might be manipulative. I could push harder here. But is that fair? If I do what they did, I'd win. But then what kind of person would I become? You pause. You pull back. You choose the slower, cleaner road, even when the fast lane is wide open and full of people cutting corners. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question starts to echo. Am I doing the right thing? Or just making myself small? It's not that you lack ambition. It's not that you don't want to lead, to create change, to be seen. It's that you feel the weight of every decision, every ripple, every consequence. And here's the hard truth. In systems that reward performance over principle, certainty over caution, and charisma over character, that weight can be crippling. Machiavelli understood this. In one of his most controversial lines, he wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good and use this knowledge when necessary." He wasn't celebrating cruelty. He was naming a reality. In any power game, the person who plays without ethical limits has more tools at their disposal. They can lie. They can manipulate. They can betray. Not because they're smarter, but because they're unburdened. They're not held back by the inner voice that says, "Wait, is this right?" That voice, your voice, is what makes you human. But it's also what makes you vulnerable. In a rigged game where the loudest wins and the ruthless rise, morality becomes a handicap. You see it everywhere. The principled candidate who loses to the populist. The honest manager who's outmaneuvered by the political schemer. The thoughtful peer who gets overlooked because they refused to oversell themselves. It's not that they weren't capable. It's that they chose not to weaponize their intelligence. They chose not to bend the truth. They chose not to play dirty. And so, they lose. Not because they failed, but because they refused to cheat. This doesn't mean morality is weakness. Far from it. It just means in a broken system, ethics come at a cost. And intelligent people, by nature, are more likely to weigh that cost because they see the long term. They know how fragile trust is. They understand that burning a bridge today might collapse a whole structure tomorrow. So they hesitate. They don't take the bait. They don't strike first. They try to win without doing harm. And often, that's exactly what keeps them from winning at all. It's heartbreaking. Because these are the people we should want in power. The ones who think twice. The ones who carry the weight. But systems built on speed and spectacle don't wait for caution. They don't reward deliberation. They reward confidence even when it's baseless, aggression even when it's reckless, certainty even when it's fake. And over time, this creates a kind of selection pressure. People with conscience get filtered out. People with strategy, but no soul rise up. The result, organizations full of people who know how to win, but have no idea what to do with power once they have it. If you've ever wondered why leadership feels hollow, why so many in charge seem more focused on protecting their image than serving their mission, this is why. The system didn't fail by accident. It succeeded at selecting the wrong traits. So what can you do if you're someone with depth, but not ruthlessness? You can't fake cruelty. You shouldn't kill your conscience. But you can protect your integrity without surrendering your influence. You can learn to recognize which systems reward ethics and which punish it. You can be strategic about where you place your energy. You can stop trying to win in arenas that were never meant for you. Most importantly, you can stop blaming yourself for not playing the game better, because sometimes not playing is the bravest move. Sometimes choosing to be good, even when it cuts you, is the only way to stay whole. Not perfect, not passive, but whole. And in a world that constantly asks you to split yourself in half, to be brilliant, but quiet, ethical, but invisible, staying whole is its own kind of victory. If you've made it this far, if this reflection resonates with something you've lived through or wrestled with, consider liking this video, subscribing if you haven't, and sharing with someone who needs to hear that their morality isn't a flaw, it's a sign they're still awake. Coming next, why simple answers are so dangerously seductive, and how our need for clarity makes us vulnerable to the very leaders who shouldn't be trusted. Let's continue. We crave answers, not someday, not eventually. Now, especially when the world feels uncertain, when everything is shifting beneath our feet, the hunger for clarity becomes overwhelming. We want to know who's right. We want to know what's true. We want to feel certain, even if deep down, part of us knows it's not that simple. This isn't weakness. It's wiring. Psychologists call it need for cognitive closure. the desire to resolve ambiguity, to shut the door on doubt, to grasp onto anything that feels final. And in moments of fear, stress, confusion, that need becomes a reflex. Give us a bold headline. Give us a clean narrative. Give us someone to blame, and someone who claims to fix it. And we'll follow, not because we've thought it through, but because it hurts too much to stay in the unknown. This is what makes us vulnerable, not to truth, but to those who sell truth. Fast, easy, oversimplified versions of it. The kind that fits in a tweet. The kind that ends with applause. The kind that feels like closure, even when it's just distraction. This is why the smartest explanations often fall flat, because they come with caveats. They come with nuance. They come with words like, "It depends." And most people, not because they're foolish, but because they're tired, don't want it. Depends. They want, "Here's what's happening, and here's what we're going to do." Certainty, even when false, is comforting, and discomfort, even when honest, is often rejected. That's why the real experts sound less convincing than the frauds. That's why the honest leaders struggle while the charlatans surge. Because real wisdom sounds like this: "I don't know yet. This is complicated. We need more time." But fake wisdom, it sounds like a battle cry, a solution, a promise. And when people are scared, they choose the promise, even if it's empty, even if it leads nowhere, even if part of them knows they're being lied to. We want to believe. That's the soft spot. That's the opening. And those who seek power, not to serve, but to control, they know this. They don't have to be right. They just have to sound right. They don't have to solve the problem. They just have to offer an answer before anyone else does. And once that answer takes root, once the narrative has wrapped itself around people's fear, it becomes nearly impossible to undo. Because now it's not just an idea, it's an identity. This is how people get radicalized. Not by logic, but by emotion, by the relief of certainty in a chaotic world. And this is what makes thoughtful leadership so difficult, because you have to offer truth while people are begging for comfort. You have to say, "This will be hard. This will take time. There are no perfect solutions." And most of the time, they won't want to hear it. So they look elsewhere, to the louder voice, to the simpler story, to the person who says, "Trust me. I alone can fix this," even if that person knows nothing, even if they've never solved anything, even if they've caused the very chaos they claim they'll clean up. It doesn't matter, because they sound sure. And to a tired brain, that's all it takes. This isn't just a theory. Study after study confirms it. People interpret data not based on its accuracy, but on whether it supports their existing beliefs. And the smarter the person, the better they are at twisting the facts to fit their narrative. It's not intelligence that protects us from misinformation. It's humility. It's the ability to say, maybe I'm wrong. But humility isn't sexy. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It just sits quietly, waiting to be heard. And in a world full of noise, few people stop long enough to hear it. So what do you do? If you're someone who sees nuance, who knows things aren't simple, how do you live in a world that punishes complexity? You resist the seduction. You train your mind to stay curious. You recognize that easy answers are rarely true, and true answers are rarely easy. And when someone offers you certainty on a silver platter, you ask what they're not telling you. You pause, you breathe, you think. Because the real battle isn't just against misinformation. It's against our own desire to believe something now, even if it's wrong, especially if it's wrong. So if you've ever felt like your questions were too much, your caution too slow, your desire to think things through too inconvenient, know this: that discomfort is a sign you're awake. That ache for truth, even when it's messy, is a kind of integrity, and it's rare, and it's needed. Now more than ever. Coming up next, how systems are designed to protect incompetent leaders, and why those in power often surround themselves with weakness to stay untouchable. Let's continue. Some leaders don't rise because they're strong. They rise because they know how to look unthreatening until the room is empty of anyone stronger. And once they're in, they don't build upward. They build downward. Down into loyalty. Down into silence. Down into mediocrity. This isn't a glitch. It's the design. Weak leaders don't fear failure. They fear exposure. And the best way to avoid being exposed, make sure no one around you is strong enough to see you clearly. It starts small. They dismiss the colleague who asks too many questions. They sideline the team member with better ideas. They promote the ones who agree quickly, not because they're right, but because they're compliant. And slowly, the light dims. Smart people learn to stay quiet. Honest people learn to smile on cue. And the real thinkers, the ones who could make it better, leave. What's left is loyalty. Not talent, not vision, just proximity. And that's all the leader needs. Because now, they're untouchable. No one challenges them, because no one can. They've built a fortress of weaker minds, not by mistake, but by intention. Machiavelli warned us about this. He wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." In other words, you don't need to hear a leader speak. Just look at who they trust. who they elevate, who they fear. It tells you everything. And what it tells us more often than we'd like is that many systems aren't broken. They're functioning exactly as their creators need them to. The goal isn't truth, it's control. The goal isn't progress, it's survival. And the surest way for a mediocre leader to survive is to never be the least competent person in the room. So they hire down, again and again, each level weaker than the last, each voice quieter, each mirror more flattering, and eventually, it's not just the leader who's incompetent. It's the whole structure, a system built to protect the illusion. We see this in governments, in corporations, in schools, even in families. Anywhere power is concentrated, this pattern can emerge, unless we stop it. But it's hard, because from the outside, everything can look fine. The metrics are fudged, the reports are polished, the meetings are rehearsed, and inside, no one speaks freely, because everyone knows if you reveal the truth, you'll be removed, not praised, not protected. Removed. So people learn to protect the leader, even when they know the leader is wrong. Not out of loyalty, but out of self-preservation. And the cycle continues. Weak leaders hire weaker minds, who in turn defend the weakness that allowed them in. And before long, it's not a team, it's a cult, not built on shared values, but on shared fear. Fear of being seen, fear of losing access, fear of the truth. You might have worked in a place like this. You might be in one now. You feel it in your gut long before you can explain it. The tension, the fakeness, the way no one says what they really mean. It wears you down. You start editing yourself, hiding your questions, pretending to believe things you don't. Not because you've changed, but because the room made you smaller. That's the real damage, not just to the work, but to the people. Because a system like this doesn't just fail to grow talent, it kills it. And then it wonders why nothing ever improves. Here's what's most painful. Sometimes it works. For a while, the leader stays protected. The system keeps moving. The image is maintained, but only until reality knocks, because reality doesn't care about loyalty. Reality only rewards competence. And when the moment comes, a crisis, a reckoning, a demand for something real, the illusion collapses, and all the people who were silenced, they're either gone or too broken to help. So what do? We watch the patterns. We stop judging leaders by their speeches and start looking at who they empower. Do they hire thinkers? Do they invite disagreement? Do they surround themselves with people who could outgrow them? Or do they build downward? The answer is never in their words. It's in their choices. And if you find yourself in one of these systems, don't shrink. Don't play dumb to fit in. Don't betray your own clarity just to feel safe. It's okay to be the person who sees the truth, even if you're the only one saying it out loud. Because even in the darkest room, one honest voice can remind others that the light still exists. Coming next, the final layer, how we build immunity to manipulation and the personal practices that protect our minds. When the world wants us to sleep, let's keep going. So what do we do? When the noise gets louder, when certainty sells faster than truth, when systems reward appearance over substance, when power no longer follows merit, we begin with attention, because awareness is the first immunity. Not dramatic resistance, not loud rebellion, but a quiet shift in how we see. We learn to recognize manipulation, not just out there, but in ourselves, in our craving for certainty, in our hunger to belong, in our impulse to believe what feels good instead of what's real. We pause when someone sounds too sure. We step back when outrage pulls us forward. We question not just them, but us, because the most powerful tool of manipulation isn't deception. It's distraction. It's making you too tired to think, too angry to reflect, too flooded to feel. And so we protect the space between stimulus and response. We slow down. That's not laziness. It's clarity. We ask, who profits from this fear? What's not being said? Why does this explanation feel so comfortable? And when we don't know, we don't pretend to. We cultivate what philosophers call intellectual humility. The ability to say, I might be wrong. I need more time. I haven't thought this through yet. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because the strongest minds aren't the ones who know the most. They're the ones who notice how little they know and stay curious. This humility becomes armor, not against failure, but against arrogance. It keeps us teachable. It keeps us human. And in a world of loud certainty, being teachable is a quiet act of defiance. Next, we become choosy with what we consume. We don't scroll endlessly. We don't reward performance with attention. We don't mistake activity for insight. We practice media literacy not as skeptics, but as stewards. We remember that information is food, and just like the body, the mind becomes what it eats. So we filter with VAR. We choose slow over viral. We seek substance over spectacle. And when the noise gets too loud, we log off, not to escape, but to return to ourselves, to stillness, to signal, because signal still exists. Quiet people are still thinking. Truth still has texture. Wisdom still whispers, if we can remember how to hear it. Then we practice reflection, not once a year. Not when everything breaks, but daily, like brushing teeth, like tending soil, we ask, what am I absorbing? Who am I becoming? What am I giving my attention to, and what is it giving back? This isn't navel-gazing, it's soul maintenance, because the world pulls hard. And if we don't anchor ourselves inward, we drift, and finally, we share, not as preachers, not as saviors, but as companions on the path. We say to others, you're not crazy for feeling this. You're not broken for struggling. There's a reason you've been quiet, and maybe now it's time to speak, because the most subversive thing we can do is remind people they're not alone in seeing clearly. That, yes, it's hard to care in a careless world. Yes, it's risky to be honest in a culture that rewards certainty. Yes, it hurts to hold complexity while others chant slogans, but it's also sacred to stay awake, to stay soft, to stay whole, even when everything around you says, hurry up, be louder, be someone else. You stay, you. And that is enough. Maybe not to change everything overnight, but enough to hold your place in a world that needs more people like you. More people who pause. More people who listen. More people who question with love and lead without ego. So ask yourself, as we end this exploration, what part of you have you been hiding just to survive? What part of you has been told it's too much, too slow, too soft? And what would it look like to bring that part forward again? Not to prove anything, not to fight, but simply to return to yourself, to truth, to light. If this journey meant something to you, if it gave language to something you've lived, consider liking this video, subscribing for more, and sharing it with someone quietly, carrying questions they've never spoken aloud. Not all healing has to be loud. Sometimes it begins in silence. Until next time, stay gentle, stay awake, stay human.